we look at your rankings, like Kenneth Walker, 17, Breece Hall, 18, Kyron Williams, 19, and then it's Ramondre at 20. Is that Kyron Williams to Ramondre? Is that the line of demarcation, do you think, between these running backs are pretty safe going into it? After that, it's like, not so sure. Oh, let me start taking some tight ends and wide receivers.
Probably about there. If you wanted to say even right now at the free agency, like I'd probably draw it at Bucky, but Javonte back in Dallas, if ETN's back in Jacksonville, K9 and Breece doing their thing as well. Like, I think they're good enough to probably still be in that inclusion. Kyron is interesting because as much as Corum did admittedly eat into his role down the stretch, it's still a situation where, all right, we're probably looking around 280 to 300 touches in one of the best offenses in the NFL. And Kyron, to his credit, man, took a big step forward last year, was much, much more efficient as a pass catcher and a rusher than he was in 2025. So I don't think, and then 2024, I should say, I don't think Blake Corum's coming for his job necessarily, but he does hurt that ceiling enough to, again, make me kind of wondering if that line is just before him or just after.
Pat Mayo Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience. We took a 5-day break from football. We're back. Fantasy football rankings for 2026 NFL season. Running backs, quarterbacks. Today, Ian Hartitz from FantasyLife.com, whose full rankings you can find down in the description. Ian, I'm very glad that you did the rankings, so I didn't have to do the rankings. So it warms my heart. It warms the cuckles of my heart, honestly.
I will say, Pat, going through it, and I fully recognize how ridiculous it is to do next season rankings here in February, but I put in a really solid first, 3 or so hours to kind of get the initial set, and then I kind of had some more time, to hopefully go through and adjust. You just start getting the one player after another and like 10 variables go through your head. And I was like, you know what? We'll do it live. It is what it is. But no, man, good to be back on the show with you.
Yeah, thank you for being on all season with me, you, and Sealy. I'll talk to Sealy soon enough, although when he sees this, I didn't tell him about it, so he's going to be like real mad. But I'll box out some time for Jake as well. But I saw you tweet out you had rankings. Like, oh, I like rankings. Let's talk about rankings. So let's talk about them. Running back, of course, there are best ball drafts currently ongoing. You can get in on football drafts at Underdog right now. If you use code Mayo, you can get a deposit bonus of up to $1,000. And Ian, you know what you can do with that $1,000? Draft NFL teams.
Hey, sounds good to me, man. I am one of the people sick enough to be drafting some teams right now. Probably like 6 or 7 in. Just, again, gets me through some time on the treadmill, so I appreciate that. But I will say, Pat, man, more than ever on Underdog, like the running backs are flying off early. And some of these starts, man, 3 running backs in the first 4 rounds, it feels sacrilegious on Underdog, but man, some of that first round, potential, I should say, first round wide receiver value late, it is nice getting some of these running backs early this year.
So is that what you've noticed? Is that consistent amongst the drafts that you've done so far? Is that it's like running, like all running backs first 2 rounds outside of like the very top end skill position players at other positions?
Some of the top wide receivers are still going. McBride is kind of on that round 1-2 turn, but it's just you get to Scatterbo and Judkins and kind of like round 4, and that's kind of the point where you just stop feeling really good about any of the running backs. So obviously, different cookies will crumble, and we'll have guys, emerge as the process gets going and everything. But man, like getting to Scatterbo and Judkins, guys who I thought we were going to have some level of injury discount, like already in round 4, man, running backs are flying off.
Is it the preferred method that you like to go? Like, do you want to start running back? And is this an overreaction or the proper reaction potentially of what's happened the past 2 years where the volume running back is now back?
Volume running back's been killing it, man. You look at even just the number of running backs per year with 300 plus touches, which skewed a little bit from this extra game, that we had to add in 2021 or whatever. But I think it's trending that way, man. Just especially in a half PPR tournament like Underdog, like if things go right for the running backs, they're going to score more points than the wide receivers. I just think overall, okay, yeah, you have your Jackson Smith-Njigbas, you'll have your huge Jamar Chase year here and there, but man, it's really tough to beat a running back that is going to be pushing for that many touches. So I wouldn't say I need 3 in the first 3. I do like coming away with 2 though, because again, we get the extra, 2 rounds right now. We are going 20 rounds, and just having those extra darts for wide receivers at the end, I've appreciated more because, man, once you get past like Tank Bigsby, Ray Davis, 2 guys I like, handcuffs, so you can get pretty late. But like after that, man, like you're legit just throwing darts at, rookie running backs from schools you've never heard of and things like that. So right now, I'd like to try to get 2 or 3 early.
Yeah, hoping that they land on the proper team where they might end up with a path to actually either getting a split workload or potential full workload, or the Rams will always draft a running back in the second round, and like maybe 5 years from now that they could touch the ball sometimes. Who knows?
Yeah, and especially, man, like I'm trying to get 3 of those top kind of 14, 15. To your point, we do have a group of guys, Javonte Williams, Travis Etienne, Kenneth Walker, and Breece Hall, all hidden free agencies. Value could go up or down depending on where they land. But I've had a couple, man, particularly if you're kind of picking the first 3 or 4 picks and then you get the 2 in a row, more or less, around 2-3 term where, man, you can start with a Jahmyr Gibbs and then loop back around with a Josh Jacobs and maybe a Bucky Irving as well. So it's kind of if I'm able to get 3 of those first 15 or so, I'm pretty interested. If I can't get that, and then all of a sudden it's, top 10 wide receiver versus a, Breece Hall or Kyron Williams, that's probably when I start turning my attention to pass catchers.
So let's go to your ranking set to half-point PPR for running back. Bijan, Gibbs, CMC are the top 3. Is that tier 1 to you and then it's a drop-off? Or is Chase Brown and James Cook, and you have Amarian Hampton at number 6 as well, then Achane. Like, are they all a part of the same tier, or is it 1, 2, 3, then take a breath, then it's the rest of them?
It's 1, 2, 3, breath, the rest of them. I think if you wanted to be provocative, you could maybe say another tier cut after Genty. And I know it feels weird to have Jonathan Taylor after everything he did in the first half outside of that. But once you get to JT, Saquon, Jacobs lesser extent, he has his own issues, but Derrick Henry, like that's kind of that group of guys where, okay, if their offense is going to go off and they're going to rip off 4 50-plus yard touchdown runs, they're going to value, but they're just not going to be catching the same amount of passes. So I definitely do think it is that top 3. How do you feel, though, with CMC, man? Because on the one hand, I balked at some of the, running backs with 370 touches are going to be screwed the next year. 369, you're fine, but 370 is when, things go rough. So I balked at that, but I will admit, Saquon didn't look the same last year, and he talked about it. And Barry Sanders talked about having, a big touch season and just not being the same next year. So like Christian McCaffrey, you can't rank him any lower than this, I don't think, and have, a great reason for it. But so a part of me, Pat, is worried about drafting CMC after he just had 400 plus freaking touches. How are you feeling?
It's all about injury with CMC in this upcoming year, that if he can just maintain, because it's not like he was super efficient this year. He made all of his bones through volume and catching passes. It's not like he was ripping off 70-yard runs. Like, out of all, like, I would like to know, and maybe you actually have the numbers on this, like what was his percentage of 10-yard runs this year? It had to have been way lower than any of the other elite fantasy running backs.
It was brutal, man. I don't think he had his first run of 20-plus yards until week 11 or 12 or something. Like, it took a long time in the season. And there were other guys, Jacobs, I think Kamara before he got injured in that same boat. But no, you said it, man. It was really the worst version we've ever seen of CMC as a pure rusher. But guess what? When you're in, half or God forbid full PPR, if you're catching as many passes as CMC, you're going to be just fine. I think when he finished the season, he would have been the wide receiver 8 just on receiving stuff, like not even including the rushing. So really is the most fantasy friendly player we got.
And so as long as he stays healthy, like, I don't really care about a dip in his efficiency because he already wasn't efficient to begin with.
That's true.
It's like, even looking at the players the most attempts last year, it was Jonathan Taylor at 323, McCaffrey at 311, James Cook 309, Derrick Henry 307. They were the only 4 in the regular season above 300 carries. Then it's into like Bijan, Barkley, Genty, Etienne, Kyron Williams. Pretty big drop off. But of looking at all those guys, like 5.2 yards per carry, 4.9 yards per carry. There's 2 of them. McCaffrey and Genty are both below 4 yards a carry. And he was still what did he end up the number 1 in half point, or was he number 1 in full point, 2nd in half point PPR? Was Bijan number 1 in half point?
I think CMC swept it. I have to double check.
Like, that's wild. Like, that's wild.
Yeah. It is. I think what you said, though, about JT, like maybe that's kind of the lesson there. It's like the players who are so reliant on their rushing efficiency staying sky high. Because that's something that even last year with Jonathan Taylor, like, yeah, he was looking like the fantasy MVP through 10 weeks or so. And the offense fell off. And guess what? His yards per carry fell off as well. So I don't think he certainly turned into a bad running back or anything. But that early down run first archetype just has, I think it's so much more volatile than someone like a CMC or Bijan who can just catch, 80 freaking passes and be fun.
So the best comp, really, was just even looking at the big play potential, the longest rush, yards per game. Genty and McCaffrey were exactly the same, except McCaffrey caught like 5 times as many passes. And we talked all year about how this offensive line made Genty pretty crappy most of the year.
But it's just one of those things, man, where when you look at some of these offensive lines, like we didn't think the Raiders were going to be a good offensive line by any stretch of the imagination. We just didn't know they were going to be as horrible as they were. I will say, Pat, Genty was a bust last year because we were drafting him as like the RB10, but if you just kind of look at that offense and remove kind of the ADP expectations we had, it's pretty impressive that the dumpster fire, league worst scoring offense with the Raiders, worst offensive line we've seen in a minute. Genty was still the RB16 and Bowers was the tight end too, man. So even again, the worst offensive environment in football still gave us two guys that at the end of the day were putting up some fantasy points.
Yeah, Genty was just outside like a running back one, even in half-point PPR. And just think about the amount of runs where he got stuffed at the line. That if they improve that at all, like he would be someone, I see that you're kind of the same way here with your rankings, that he is someone that you're willing to gamble on. He's young. He's going to get the volume. If he catches a few more passes, he's going to be good to go. But just kind of to swing it back to McCaffrey for a second. So I'm just looking at big plays from last year, quantified as 20-yard plus rushing plays. In 311 carries, how many 20-yard or more runs do you think McCaffrey had?
He got going a little bit more late. I'm going to say 4.
3.
Oh, 3? Come on, CMC.
Same as Genty, same as Josh Jacobs. The guys that you brought up. Derrick Henry had 17. Taylor and James Cook both had 9. ETN had 7. Bijan had 8. I don't know where Achane went. Achane had 13. Kenneth Walker had 10. So you see like the explosion from some of these guys. That's probably what I'd be more willing to bank on because then you get away with the bad efficiency. If like, I guess it really depends here. Like, if you're going to rank McCaffrey, I could see putting him behind Bijan. Do we think David Montgomery's going to be back? Because I did see Jahmyr Gibbs talk about that. Like, I would love to have David Montgomery around, but Montgomery might want to trade out of Detroit so he can be a starting running back again.
He is one of those guys with the contract where they could get out of it if they want to. Detroit, I don't think they're exactly overflowing with cap space right now, so it could make a lot of sense. And I think maybe with Petzing there now as the OC, they do want to lean a little bit more solely on Gibbs. So I don't know. I will say it was interesting last year. Montgomery had that massive early season game against the Ravens. Like, I don't think he was falling off a cliff. It's just more so Gibbs is so freaking good. I don't think they can justify taking touches away from him. So it will be interesting. We got Montgomery, we got James Conner, we got Alvin Kamara, even Josh Jacobs, just by the virtue of his contract. I was trying to explain that in an article that our Fantasy Life newsletter, Pat, and I've said it, possibility with the contract numbers. I don't think it's going to happen. Sleeper NFL apparently thinks I'm a reporter now, and it goes out last night. Ian Hartitz says that Josh Jacobs is going to be a cap casualty. So now I got Packers fans screaming at me and throwing cheese and all that stuff. So we'll see what happens. But there are some big, Joe Mixon's another one. I'd say that's more likely than not. Aaron Jones potentially. DeAndre Swift with the Bears. Like, there are a handful of guys where just quickly we see them cut. It's going to open up, a pretty fancy friendly role.
You have far more followers than I do on the X machine, but my tweets have started to be picked up in the For You tab, and like all of these people, and mine's usually about golf, and just the wildly stupid responses that I get to some of this stuff is mind-numbing.
There is a certain point, man, because, I think the fantasy community is actually, at least the ones, commenting on my stuff, usually pretty rational more times than not. But I'll notice when tweet, I don't know, a couple hundred likes, and you start seeing it escalate in a hurry when it makes it to the For You tab. And like once a tweet from fantasy land, it gets out to like real NFL fandom land who doesn't care about fantasy football. It's a bloodbath out there, man.
Like, it's one thing to not care about fantasy football. I completely understand that as a fan, but you'd figure out what the context was of it instead of just getting irrationally mad, wouldn't you?
You would think, Pat. You would think. So I don't know. I remember one time, Michael, I tweeted like, most consecutive games with 6 catches or whatever. And I was including playoffs, and the Michael Thomas responded. He was like, wrong. And I was like, appreciate you, Mike. I was just including playoffs, like have a great season or whatever. And just the amount of Saints fans that still came at me over that, like just an honest, not even a mistake. So I wish people had something better to do, but you know what? To each their own.
Yeah, I had one. Here's how innocuous the one I had was. There was a guy melting down on the 72nd hole at Pebble Beach, and Jacob Bridgman isn't like a big, like, do you know who Jacob Bridgman is?
No.
So that's kind of the point of it, that he was in like 4th place in this tournament in an elevated event. 4th place is like $1 million. So it's a big payday for him. And he puts it down on the beach at Pebble Beach. It's like, oh no. And then he hits it into the water. It's like when he was standing on the tee, he was due to make like $1.3 million. If he makes double here because of this, he's going to lose $600,000. If he makes a triple, he's going to lose $800,000. I thought that was like somewhat fascinating. And people were like, yeah, he still made $300,000. Like, how good at golf are you? It's like, I don't know where like your mind connected that to, but just kind of saying like, this sucks for this guy.
That's someone who's never had the DFS sweat where you're just, you shouldn't look at your earnings throughout the day, but you do. And then all of a sudden winning a bunch of money is more like, no, actually I lost a bunch of money because I got my hopes up when I shouldn't have.
Chase Brown is at number 4. James Cook, Omarion Hampton, Achane, Ashton Genty, Jonathan Taylor, Barkley, Jacobs, Henry, and then you have Jeremiah Love as a free agent. Obviously, we don't know where he's going to go. Rumored to the Chiefs. We'll see if that ends up happening. Nothing like a good offseason tradition of good running back drafted and mocked to the Chiefs. It happens. It's been happening every year for the past 6 years.
It's interesting though, in that top 10, we get the Commanders, we get the Saints, who again, we'll see if Kamara is still going to be on the squad here next year. And then the Chiefs, where it's 3 teams that, I don't think we hate those offenses. Chiefs, obviously with the healthy Mahomes, we could potentially love them, and they also just have a huge hole at that running back spot. So sometimes, even Jahmyr Gibbs, it worked out obviously, but when he went to Detroit at 12, it was like, oh, how are they going to divide this up between him and Dave Montgomery? I mean, I think any of those 3, again, Washington, the Saints, or the Chiefs, like we're looking at Jeremiah Love at 13. And maybe saying that's too low. So we'll see what happens, Pat. I know Genty and Hampton came in with a lot of first-round expectations too, but just everything I've, seen really from Jeremiah Love, this dude does seem to have that, extra twitch with the football in his hands. Also a very capable pass catcher. So I think he's got that 3-down explosive pass catching skill set that we, again, just really want to invest in, because if you can get 300-plus touches, which I do think he has the skills and the body type for, it's a situation where it's tough to rank them too low wherever they end up.
What you talked about in the curse of X amount of touches, does James Cook fall into that? Because I feel like big regression candidate, James Cook. Like first time over 300 carries. He went absolutely off last year. We kind of had a down year for the expectation of Josh Allen, like 1-yard touchdowns. He still had them, but Cook scored far more touchdowns than I think that anyone thought that he would. That if he just all of a sudden was back to being running back 13 again, that wouldn't surprise me.
He's good. He's at 342. Bijan finished last year at 366, and Jonathan Taylor is at 369. So they're fine. If JT had one more, we'd have to really be concerned here about what's going on.
But to think about it in those terms, like I would put him more in the Jonathan Taylor camp, whereas Bijan's more in the McCaffrey camp. Like even if Bijan gets nothing on the ground, he'd still be a very useful fantasy running back because of all the receiving work. Like James Cook's going to have like 30 catches.
No, I hear you. And that is the wild part with James Cook, where when you look at his year 2 in the league, that was when he scored 4 receiving touchdowns. He had 44 catches of 445 yards. He's dropped. Like I've literally made a clip of, I think, 4 different touchdown passes. Like he'll get these wheel opportunities and they'll be wide open enough to drop it, which is pretty hard in and of itself. But no, man, they paid Ty Johnson to be kind of their third down back, and they don't even mind Ray Davis there as well. So it is a little weird to see James Cook be a little bit more touchdown dependent than we would expect. But hey, if we do end up seeing that tush push outlawed, it would certainly be a nice little boost for Cook to still get those touchdowns around the goal line. So just, again, going from 2023, where a lot of this stuff was him catching the ball, to 2024, where it was like, all right, well, if he's not catching the ball, he's going to need to keep scoring touchdowns, and he did. But then 2025, they paid him, then they gave him north of 300 carries. So he is more in that JT bucket, even though I do think he has the skills as a receiver to be more like a, middle-class man's Bijan or CMC. So maybe the role keeps evolving. That would be the one concern for fading, I think, Cook in that same sentiment. Guys like Jonathan Taylor, like I just don't ever see them catching 60, 70 passes. Cook could do it if they decide to change up the role a little bit.
Yeah, I would have more confidence that Chase Brown continues to do it, that obviously Hampton and that offense, maybe with who's their passing game coordinator? It's someone who sucks. Forget who it is. But with Mike McDaniel's the OC, but they brought in a passing game coordinator too, someone who's like awful. It's hilarious.
We never care about pass game coordinators until we find out like who it is a couple years later. Like that's the thing with the Kevin Patella, the Eagles guy. Like I understand it didn't go well for him as the OC, but he was their pass game coordinator a couple previous 3 years, and no one complained about that.
It's true. Let's see. I can't even find who it is. Oh, it's Adam Gase is who it is.
Oh, God. That is pretty bad.
But no, with McDaniel there, obviously you expect a big boost for someone like Hampton. Maybe even Vidal gets a bit more work as well, but probably not as much as he had this year. But as a viable running back 4, running back 5, someone who could step in and potentially produce fantasy points like we saw this year. And I would guess that their offensive line is probably going to be a little bit better with both tackles expected to return in Los Angeles. But then Achane's kind of the other way, where Tyreek Hill has already been cut. No idea what this offense looks like. And it felt like he was patched together a lot due to Great skill, great burst, but Mike McDaniel's scheming him open. They don't have that offensive mind anymore. For as much shit as people want to give Mike McDaniel, he did make that offense viable, and they had no talent, really, by the end of it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I do agree with the sentiment. You earn targets. You're not going to get a bunch of targets if you're not good enough to actually be catching them, making good things happen for your offense. But for someone like Achane, I just wonder if we're going to see that same emphasis on force feeding him the ball in the pass game. I know he's capable of doing good things. We've seen that over the course of these past 2 years, but this is most likely going to be the worst offense we've seen from them. He already kind of took a little bit of a step back last season, and just when he was going bonkers, and he took a step back as a receiver last year. 2024 was a really big year. And like when he was doing that, it was just such a weird, neutered version of an offense that was only kind of working because Tua was getting the ball out as fast as he could to Achane, Jonnu Smith. I mean, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle were doing nothing. Like, that's not what you want. That's not a good offense. It reminds me of, in the past, that Rams year where Tyler Higbee was going nuts for the final 4 or 5 weeks. So you can look at that and say, good job, Tyler, but you can also look at that and say, like, is that really what Sean McVay and the Rams want to do there? So Achane, very talented player, has that explosive ability, but just do I think Achane is that much of a better talent than Hampton, than James Cook, than Chase Brown? Maybe he is, but I don't think that makes up the difference in how much worse the Dolphins offense could be compared to the Chargers, compared to the Bills, compared to the Bengals.
I can see that, and it could just be a volume play. I think I'd probably go with him over James Cook again, just because of the pass catching and what I would project for that. Sure. But again, this is February. Who knows where I'm going to end up falling. Then you get into this mini tier of Taylor, Barkley, Jacobs, Henry, all guys who don't really catch a lot of passes. But I think I would still be willing to gamble on the Barkley rebound.
Yeah, it's just wild that last year happened. He didn't, not like he had debilitating injury, just didn't look the same out there.
That offense didn't look the same though. Like they were a kind of a shitty offense.
They were, but I don't know that we can assume it's going to be turned around necessarily. The offensive line starting to lose some of their, long timers. Is Lane Johnson maybe coming back? I know their offensive line coach is gone, so it's up in the air to see if Lane's going to come back. Obviously, I think they thought they had a better long-term replacement for Kelsey than they actually did. So I think it'll be better, but even like we did, as someone who didn't draft as much Saquon as I wanted to in 2024, I mean, the rationale behind that was like, okay, this dude's going to have to be scoring these long touchdowns because he's not going to get goal line opportunities with the tush push. And he's also probably not going to catch many passes. And we saw that happen in 2024, but he just scored so many 50-yard touchdowns it didn't matter. So this last season, we did see some of those, issues pop up. And that's why, again, him and Jonathan Taylor are just maybe lower than they otherwise should be, because I think JT really does fit that same prototype. If he's going to be just the best running back in football, which we know he's capable of doing, ripping off 60-yard scores, okay. But if not, man, once again, inside the 5, Daniel Jones is going to be, sneaking across a couple times, and it's just not an offense that we can expect a ton of receptions from.
Well, Barkley was closer to the CMC Genty range in yards per carry and explosiveness than he was to any of the elite running backs, which maybe he was hiding an injury, maybe it was the year after, maybe it was the offensive line, some combination of all of those things. But I'm curious to know where he's going to go in drafts. That's probably where I would start with a lot of this, that if all of a sudden he is a mid-second round pick again, is that where he's going, or is he still going back into the first?
I think an early second. You can get him a little bit later, so I hear you there. I will say it's a little damning to me for CMC and Saquon. Brian Robinson and Tank Bigsby look better running the football last year. I know they can't do everything those guys can do, but if you just took your grandma or someone, then maybe your grandma does watch football. Just take someone who doesn't watch football and say, hey, watch these 10 Tank Bigsby runs and watch these 10 Saquon Barkley runs. If they knew nothing else, they'd be like, yeah, Tank Bigsby looks like the more explosive player right now. So I don't think Tank's going to be taking Saquon's job or anything, but I have a tougher time, I guess, making the they're just going to bounce back next year. Like it was just a bad situation. When I see the backup running backs in the same offense doing so much more with their opportunities, man, that's a little bit of a problem for me.
You can also attribute that off to when Brian Robinson comes into the game. It's after the defense has been whittled down by CMC after 20 straight touches. And a lot of the times when Tank Bigsby's coming into the game, they're either up by a bunch or down by a bunch or in clear passing situations. So, yeah, he's shredding the defense. But if you gave him 20 carries, it might not work that way.
No, that's definitely part of it. So I would just, again, it's looking at Seahawks were another one last year, like when Charbonnet was actually doing bad to start. I was like, well, maybe Walker's just not exactly, I don't know what I'm saying there. Yeah, it's a good point, Pat. It's a good point.
So right now in early underdog drafts, Barkley is going at pick 17, which is like dead set in the middle of the second round. Shockingly enough, this surprised me because I was with you on Chase Brown being number 4. He's going 23rd overall.
I can't stop drafting him. Honestly, I thought like that's the one I had the biggest difference with relative to ADP. So good to see you're on the same page. But yeah, man, I don't know what we're missing at this point. We saw him in the back half of 2024 really come on strong, but it was like, well, Zach Moss got banged up. I know it's Zach Moss, but he was taking touches during the first half. And then this last season, like SamajePerine was a little bit more annoying than we were hoping for, but still was a Chase Brown show. I just think that we saw those, 3 or 4 games with Jake Browning that really nuked everyone in the offense. Jamar Chase for a little bit too, and of course Chase Brown as well. So each of these last 2 seasons, though, the final 8 weeks, and we've been doing weekly ranks like regularly, we've had Chase Brown's a top 5 running back. So I don't know why he shouldn't be up there right now. We love the Bengals. We know Chase Brown can catch 50, 60 plus passes, and maybe doesn't have the best vision in the world, but he's still an explosive running back who we saw rush with relatively good efficiency. So be a little bit cooler. The Bengals offensive line was more of a trust point, but again, if we're just trying to really stack up everything we know about these guys, I don't think Chase Brown is a top 5 real life running back, but like, is the gap between him and Devon Achane, who's that much better? Again, I don't think that outweighs the potential for Brown to have more opportunity and a way better offense.
The other one, like looking at the ADP, like Jonathan Taylor going at pick number 6, I get it. That would not be for me at this point, because how great did he do the moment Daniel Jones wasn't playing quarterback anymore for the Colts?
That's the thing. And they've fed him the ball, and he's not the worst receiver in the world. He's kind of like Derrick Henry, where I think he just lived with a couple of the drops and say, hey, let's get this, freakish athlete out here in space just a couple times a game. Easier to do that in the pass game. So yeah, that's why I have him ranked a little bit lower, man. I think it's just, we see this probably with Saquon last year. Not that we could all foresee, the crash coming the way it did necessarily, but there's just a couple of those guys where I think they're just probably inflated based on them having a good season in 2025, not taking anything away from Jonathan Taylor, but like, yeah, I don't want to draft him 6th overall.
I would like to have him on my team, just not at that cost. Even looking at his yards per carry, like he was a pure volume merchant. He had the big game in, I think it was Munich or Frankfurt against the Eagle or the Falcons that they won in overtime. He had like 250 yards rushing in that game. After that, he basically did nothing. He didn't crack 100 yards the rest of the season and only scored 3 touchdowns.
And again, when he's doing that and he's only catching, I'm looking at right now, like 2 or 3 passes basically every single game of the season, you're dealing with duds, man, and you can't really be having that. So again, maybe he does just go nuclear, but and I don't like doing a thing where it's, I'll take away his big games, and then what do you have there? Because obviously a lesser guy wouldn't have had the big games. But you said it, man. Falcons, he plays the Titans. He's going absolutely bonkers, scoring 5 or 6 touchdowns in 2 combined games. But yeah, man, just 2026 for me, it's a sort of archetype that I'm not going to be trying to like overly spend on. Like, what really, if we wanted to move, that archetype, right? You're hoping for 300 plus touches, explosive player, hopefully can score on the ground a lot. Is that so different from a healthier version of Quinshon Judkins going 4 rounds later? Is it so different than where Travis Etienne could end up? Jonathan Taylor is better than those guys. I get it. But man, you need Jonathan Taylor to be the best running back in the league to meet that cost.
Look, I'll be straight with you. We talk all the time about getting better at work, sports, in life, whatever it might be. But most guys ignore the one thing that actually drives all of it: your head. Therapy isn't a weakness. It's a tool. I've seen it help guys deal with work stress, family stuff, breakups, addictions, whatever it might be. Just getting unstuck when everything feels heavy. The problem? It's usually a pain to get started. Long wait list, huge cost, total hassle, you know the deal. That's why Rula is different. Rula makes therapy simple, affordable, and fast. They work with most major insurance plans, and sessions can cost as little as $15. You answer a few quick questions, they match you with a licensed vetted therapist that actually fits what you need, and you can be talking to someone as soon as the next day. No weeks of waiting, no guessing if you pick the right person. If you've been putting this off, stop! Go to Rula.com/Mayo and get started today. That's RULA.com/Mayo. Once again, that's Rula.com/Mayo. Take the first step. Take control of your mental health. The new year's here, and if you're like me, you're gonna want to get your house back on track. Considering I've been through 8 weeks of renovations, my house still isn't back on track, but I do need some new stuff. That's where Wayfair came into play and was quite handy and had some awesome stuff. Wayfair is basically a one-stop shop for everything your home needs. We got new appliances, and now we need crap in the kitchen that matches that stuff. Or so I was told. Go on to Wayfair, get it. Stuff to put in the drawers to separate everything with our new cabinets, also on Wayfair. Complete game changer. It's been awesome. And I haven't had to go to the store. I've just been able to do it from home, which I find is a big win for me. Get organized, refreshed, and back on track for the new year for way less. So head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com, Wayfair. Every style, every home. Tier number 3, after Jeremiah Love at number 13, we go to Bucky Irving, Javonte Williams, ETN, Kenneth Walker, Breece Hall, who may or may not be back on the Jets. We'll see what happens in the offseason with him. Kyron Williams, Ramondre, Swift, Scattaboo, Judkins, RJ Harvey, Chuba Hubbard, Jalen Warren, James Conner, who may or may not be back with the Cardinals at this point. Ditto with Kamara, Pollard, your boy, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. Why would they need to draft a running back, Ian? They got Bill.
They got Bill. Actually came on pretty nicely there last 3 games in the playoffs. So had the late Chris Rodriguez scratch on Christmas morning where no one was able to adjust their lineups in time. So got a little bit of help right there, but he is the last man standing as of right now. I think C-Rod is like an RFA. I don't know if I can call him C-Rod. I feel like you got to earn a nickname like that. Rodriguez.
He was good. Yeah, he was. Listen, he was carrying them for most of the season in that backfield. Not that they were any good in the backfield, but he was their best guy for most of the season. And is Eckhart going to be back?
I don't know, man. Just up there in age. He's an unrestricted free agent. He had a knee injury. When I couldn't come up with an example earlier, the Washington Commanders would be one last year when Bill was actually like running well, but it was like, all right, he's averaging 5 yards per carry. Chris Rodriguez and Jerry McNichols are averaging, 6 and 6.5 yards per carry. So it's a good litmus test sometimes to see guys working in the same environment. But I think Washington's going to add someone, but they have a lot of holes. That's the NFL's oldest roster right now. And if it does end up being another day 3 back sort of competition, like maybe, just maybe, Bill could be a bit of a post-hype, 2026 dude.
I would guess that Kenneth Walker is being drafted ahead of this based on what we saw through the playoffs and Super Bowl. I don't envision him just being a bell cow back in the regular season. I could see them treating him a lot like they did this year and working in Charbonnet, or who the hell was the other guy? Hulani, that guy. Just don't give him a bunch of carries until you need him.
And that was kind of the problem. Obviously, Walker was scoring touchdowns, and he had a fantastic playoff stretch and everything. But even in the NFC Championship and the Super Bowl, I was surprised with how much George Hulani was the one stealing some of those fantasy-friendly 2-minute drill snaps, the obvious pass downs and things of that nature. So if he is back in Seattle, we got a note this morning that they are not planning on franchise tagging Walker. So doesn't mean they can't sign him to a deal. I do think with the Charbonnet injury happening as late as it did, it's more likely that K9 will be back in Seattle, but just kind of depends where he goes. I don't think the Chiefs are going to be able to pay up for him, but there are a couple spots, the Jaguars say, see ya ETM, but come on down, Kenneth Walker. All of a sudden, we'd probably be drafting him earlier than this.
Do you feel like RJ Harvey and Travion Henderson are good targets in year 2, that maybe they make the leap, they learn the system, they see where they suck, they can go practice now. Now, all of a sudden, they're back to being what you wanted them to be this year when people drafted them?
Harvey has a better chance because Dobbins is a UFA, and if he's not going to be re-signed to Denver, then okay, we could see that same sort of end-of-season role for Harvey where he is now the lead back, and if he's given up a few snaps, it's not stopping him from getting his 15-plus touches. But he was a clear-cut backup to Dobbins, and for good reason. Dobbins was better than him at running the football, at least. So Harvey does good things, explosive-wise and being a good pass catcher. But, again, just seems like maybe his, feet are moving a little bit too fast for his mind, which, hey, he was just a rookie running back. With Travion, I'd be more concerned about it because, man, Ramondre Stevenson, what did he do at any point all year to start actually losing touches to this guy? So it was good to see them because he only played Travion 4 total freaking snaps in the AFC Championship. So they got back in the Super Bowl to at least, designing some outside hitting plays for the guy because you should. He's a home run hitter and needs the ball, at least, in a gadget sense to get the most out of him. But just I have a hard time seeing, man, other than an injury to Ramondre Stevenson, I don't know how Travion's going to go up there and give us this top 15 upside. So for me, not someone I'm exactly going out of my way to bet on. Can't rank him too low, but I will say too, man, I think one of the lessons I took away from last year was I don't want to be over drafting kind of RB2s when you have just, later round handcuffs that are arguably in the same situations, but don't exactly have as big a name going much later. So Blake Corum's another guy we have down here at RB32, where I know he was having a good end of season stretch and everything, but man, unless Kyron Williams goes down, like we're not going to be thrilled about Blake Corum on a weekly basis. And right now where he's being drafted, man, like there's still some pretty good receivers and stuff on the board.
There are one thing I found interesting, and maybe this is par for the course, but Monanganai going ahead of Tootin in drafts so far by about a round. Blake Corum down at like 94 and Monanganai at right around 85. I think that the gap between Swift and Monanganai is probably a lot closer than maybe. I mean, you have one at 21, you have one at 35. I'd probably have them at like 27, 29 kind of thing with it. Maybe even a slight lean towards Monanganai because it feels like that's the route that they want to go when he's ready, and then they'll just send off DeAndre Swift to the pastures.
I think you're adding like an extra vowel in that. Monanganai.
Why keep going?
Fair enough. Look, two guys where very easily maybe we could see him rise up if we are seeing DeAndre Swift as a cap casualty. Travis Etienne doesn't come back and they do get that full-time role. Just how likely really is that? Monangai ran hard, man, but if he's running as hard, and I think the eye test is almost better from Monangai than some of the stats, so I do want to give credence there. With Tootin, honestly, as much as I was like anti-Tootin last year, Pat, just because I felt like a lot of the conversation around him was trying to put down Etienne, and Etienne was having himself a very good year in his own right. I almost think Tootin's a little bit undervalued now because if you don't watch him, you just look at some of his stats, like he's someone who didn't have many runs over 10-plus yards throughout the year, and he's actually really low in the explosive run rates. But if you watch the guy play, like it looks like he's shot out of a cannon every time he touches the ball. He had the one bad swing pass on like Thursday Night Football where he ran to the back of his guy in the open field. And the way we talk about vision is like one bad example that we happen to catch in a primetime game. Now, all of a sudden, that guy has the worst vision in the league, and we barely consider it for anyone else. So, Tootin and Monangai, again, depending on how these free agents shake out, are going to be interesting. I will say, and I don't have them ranked very high, so I'm falling victim to this as well. But if you just wanted to say, like, all right, day 3 running back, did a couple okay things down the stretch, starters hitting free agency, Jaden Blue is completely free in drafts right now. Had a big week 18, was kind of in the doghouse. I'm just saying, man, someone who this time last year everyone was all hyped about, didn't go well in year 1. I get it, but dude still has some tools, and he is free right now.
I could see it as a flyer, just to quote the badge rule, just scroll the F down and boom, just grab him in the 20th. Sure, I could most definitely see that. Is there any chance they don't bring back Javonte Williams after the season he had? Because I don't think he's gonna be in demand as a free agent, honestly.
Nah, if they can bring him back in that 8 to 12 million range, I feel like they probably would. Apparently the Cowboys are very willing to, trade Pickens off that franchise tag. So if they aren't going to be forfeiting up a ton of money to Pickens, because, gotta imagine he's going to be demanding 25 million plus on a per year basis, if not even getting up into 30.
Would you give it to him?
Afford Javonte.
If you were not the Cowboys, if you were a random team and you put him on the franchise and traded him on the franchise, would you want to pay George Pickens as a top 5 receiver? Because I wouldn't. I think that he has that sort of talent. I don't know if I would be the one who wanted to pay him on my team.
It's scary, man. I get it. Because just as great as last season was, the Lions game just sticks out to you. And even the next week, I remember Collinsworth just saying, like, yeah, it kind of looks like he's putting in similar effort out here. So still some better games after there down the stretch. It is interesting, though. I wish we had 2 categories like of off the field problems, because in Pickens' case, like he just loses interest during the course of a game and the effort wanes, which isn't good. He's doing WWE shit, picking up flags and all that. That's not good. But like, I don't like the fact that Pickens' off the field issues is now kind of placed in the same bucket as like drug users or like actual pieces of shit in real life. So
it's funny.
That's the thing. Like, Pickens, okay, like I'm with you. It's not perfectly clear there, but like if you had to explain to someone why you don't want to pay the guy, it's like, well, he's kind of a diva and he'll do some weird things on the field, but like he's not out there breaking the law.
No, he's just kind of a knucklehead.
Yeah.
Like you just kind of, just you can always count on him for every 2 games a 15-yard penalty, and you're just like, what are you doing? Like you just gained 50 yards. Stop this.
If you're the Patriots and you got this strong locker room and you're Vrabel and you think, you can screw his head on straight and all that, go for it. when I think of like the Titans or the Raiders, two teams that have the money that really
don't.
do need wide receiver help. Yeah, that's the problem. Like George Pickens on the Titans, how is he going to be reacting when they're? I thought it was a miracle that it took him as long as he did, and like a bad Cowboys team to really have any problems on the field. Like what? Week 5 in Tennessee that we're expecting a blow up.
Well, they had to go to Vegas so he could be caught out at the casino late with CeeDee Lamb, and then they both destroyed the game.
That was a hilarious storyline. So we'll see. Todd Archer apparently came out and said like there were multiple other times that Pickens was fine. So I don't know exactly how much stuff was going on behind the scenes, but it'll be interesting how that plays out.
If it's me and I'm trading for Pickens, I'm trying to treat this as a 1 or 2 year thing if I'm close. And then like you have to live with the consequences after that. But like New England, like you said, Buffalo, Green Bay, teams that could desperately use an alpha wide receiver 1, those would be the teams that I think should make that move if they can finagle it. But if, like you said, I think the Raiders and Titans are the prime example of teams that should not do that.
And it's funny too, because all these wide receivers, mainly on the trade block, have this sort of stigma going around. AJ Brown, George Pickens, Brandon Ayuk. So you might have to just, again, you're not going to see a number 1 wide receiver on the trade market unless there's some sort of, reddish flag going on. So I will say this, I feel better about Pickens than Brandon Ayuk right now. Like, does Ayuk still want to play football? That's kind of and I do wonder with Ayuk, because it sounds like he's just going to get released. I mean, that's the plan. They were able to avoid his guarantees and stuff. Like, Ayuk 2 years ago, I thought deserved every penny of that $30 million extension he got, but are teams really going to be lining up to give him a big money extension? I think someone will pay Pickens for sure, but I do wonder if Ayuk could be in a situation where he almost has to think about more of a 1 year, $12, $15 million deal. And if that's going to be the case, all of a sudden his list of suitors becomes much more interesting. Then the Bills and the Chiefs, one of those teams could get in for a 1 year mercenary sort of deal with Ayuk. I don't think you're getting that with AJB or Pickens.
Scatterboo, Judkins. There's no way Judkins is going to be ready for the beginning of the year, right? He like snapped his leg in two.
I'm doing a study on that, like literally the next couple of days. My RB Tiers article coming out. We're moving on to that now, and I do want to get a better idea for it because even with like Scatterboo, man, some of the stuff I saw someone equating to the Dak Prescott injury, and like, well, Dak was ready by week 1, and I'm like, yeah, he looked like he lost 5 years of mobility out there, so. It's going to be tough, man. Like, I think, and while it's weird with these two, I think with Judkins, they're like, oh, yeah, he just fractured his fibula in half, but there's no knee ligament damage. And I'm like, well, doesn't sound ideal either. So, and then once you finally get past that for Judkins in particular, it's like, all right, well, let's say he is healthy and ready to go. Like, is it going to be the first couple games we saw of last year? Because those are great. Or is it going to be the final 9 games when it's like, yeah, no matter how good you are, you're still running behind a dog shit Browns offensive line and an offense that's not going to score points. So Scatterboo, I'd be more willing to, I guess, throw a dart at there just because, again, at least you have a guy where when he's right, he can catch a bunch of passes, and we saw everything he did. But also doesn't exactly strike me as a sort of running back where if we are losing half a step, that's going to go overly well. So, again, that's kind of why, man, when I have been drafting so far early on, if I can get 2, maybe even 3 of the top 13, 14 guys, I'm pretty happy because once I get to Scatterboo and Judkins, like I'm taking the better wide receiver 9 times out of 10.
Do you think that's the cutoff at running back when we look at your rankings? Like Kenneth Walker, 17, Breece Hall, 18, Kyron Williams, 19, and then it's Ramondre at 20. Is that Kyron Williams to Ramondre? Is that the line of demarcation, do you think, between these running backs are pretty safe going into it? After that, it's like, not so sure. Oh, let me start taking some tight ends and wide receivers.
Probably about there. If you wanted to say even right now at the free agency, like I'd probably draw it at Bucky, but Javonte back in Dallas, if ETN's back in Jacksonville, K9 and Breece doing their thing as well. Like, I think they're good enough to probably still be in that inclusion. Kyron is interesting because as much as Corum did admittedly eat into his role down the stretch, it's still a situation where, all right, we're probably looking around 280 to 300 touches in one of the best offenses in the NFL. And Kyron, to his credit, man, took a big step forward last year, was much, much more efficient as a pass catcher and a rusher than he was in 2025. So I don't think, and in 2024, I should say, I don't think Blake Corum's coming for his job necessarily, but he does hurt that ceiling enough to, again, make me kind of wonder if that line is just before him or just after.
Well, the picks going right now in these early drafts, Bucky is going at 29, pick number 30, Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, 31, Kyron Williams, 34, ETN, 36. Then it's a little bit of a drop to Scatterboo at 44, Trevion Henderson, 45, RJ Harvey, Quidjon Judkins. That seems about right. And if pressed, would I take Kenneth Walker over Kyron Williams? I'd really have to think about that. And obviously you don't have to do all your drafts in February. You can wait for drafting to happen, the NFL draft and training camp to start if you really want to focus in on it. But just like gun to my head, I feel like Kyren Williams scores more fantasy points next year.
Okay, who probably could have the best case run out if Walker falls into a new situation? It's Walker, but who's to say he's get the best case run out? And that's one of the things too, man, where people, and I drafted Walker. I was really high on him at certain points of the offseason. I appreciate Jake giving us, the update, like in mid-August, like, I don't know about that full-time role. So wasn't all in, but I don't think it's fair in fantasy to watch Walker in the playoffs and then be like, oh, see, he is sweet. I told you guys, I'm not wrong. It's a team that's wrong. No, our job is to try to not only pick good players, but good players who are going to be getting the touches to score fantasy points. So I do think when you consider that, man, that is where Kyren's perhaps going to be underrated, but he's going next to T. Higgins, A.J. Brown, Tedero McMillan, Garrett Wilson, Jameson Williams. Kyren, ETN, those are probably about – I'd say that's the line. I think Scadaboo, Henderson, that's when I'm starting to get more concerned. And probably I take Colson Loveland. I take those wide receivers. I can still talk myself into Kyren and ETN over like Loud McConkey and Garrett Wilson.
You prefer Derrick Henry to Josh Jacobs?
Where do I have him ranked? Yeah.
Now you got Josh Jacobs by you got
Josh Jacobs.
When you were talking about like, hey, there's a few guys when I'm making these rankings, and this is how maybe you're completely different than me, but even when I do my weekly rankings, if you ask me at like different times during the day about two guys that are back to back, unless it's a clear tier break between one guy to another, you're like, I put them in whatever order you want. I feel like those two are really, and getting that question right is going to be imperative, especially throwing Barkley into the mix with those three guys. But to look at it, it's like, I think Jacobs is the worst of those three, talent-wise, although he's very good, but you're comparing him to Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry, even at elevated ages. But, like, what's that role going to look like? He was banged up for part of last year and played through an injury and then had to sit. And we saw Emmanuel Wilson. Emmanuel Wilson looked pretty good. Maybe that there's going to be a flip back, that maybe it's not going to be 22 touches a game for Josh Jacobs anymore. Just all of this starts going around my mind right now that we're re-bringing it up and trying to project out on what's going to happen 8 months from now.
I will say Jacobs is someone where he could catch 50 passes, and like we know he has that skill set to be able to do it. So that's probably, my slight tiebreaker over Henry. And also just who I'm more confident in Matt LaFleur and the Packers fielding a really good offense than I am with the Eagles and even the Ravens next year, man. So we'll see what happens. No more Todd Monken, obviously, or Harbaugh. So not saying they're necessarily going to go down. Lamar Jackson's still very good at football, but a lot of disappointment with Derrick Henry before he won their fantasy championship that happened to have him in week 17. So that counts, and that was awesome. But it's almost like we're getting juice on that singular performance in the same way where in 2024, when Terry McLaurin busts in week 17, all of a sudden, his fantastic year doesn't mean as much to the fantasy manager. So I do think that, in that early tier name, I had it as just like Unk still got it, because I do think that those guys still are good. They're not washed. I'm not pushing them down to the Kamara and James Conner range or anything like that. But man, Jacobs, I think he scored 30 touchdowns in 32 games with the Packers. To your point, he was really banged up those last 3-4 weeks. And I just think that he has a bit more of a pass game ceiling than those other guys. So no, I think he deserves to be right there with him.
Last two running back questions. One, why such a big gap between Hubbard and Dowdle, if all things are being equal?
If Dowdle's back with the Panthers, and I'll have them right next to each other, I don't think he's going to be back, man. He said right after the season, like his workload down the stretch is, not something that he was very happy with. Saints
for him if they cut Kamara?
Maybe or Jeremiah Love, which seems to be the trendy mock draft there. So Dowdle is interesting. He did suck down the stretch, though. We do need to.
Sure, he had that generational run, and shocker that didn't continue. That he was the best running back in all of football after that 3-week stretch. The Saints taking a running back, like a good running back early, makes, and it's not that they're not going to do it. We just saw the Raiders draft Genty, who. Great work on that one. He's some generational talent. You stick him behind me blocking for him, it's not really going to work out. If you're the Saints, I just don't understand the logic behind it. It's like, we have this second round. We have this second year quarterback who looks like he's going to be pretty good. Let's give him this elite running back who is not going to be able to go anywhere or help the offense. Why don't you give Shuck a receiver or an offensive lineman? Maybe help him out that way.
I hear you, man. If I was running the Saints, I would not be my move. I'd take Carnell Tate or Mekhi Lemon or Jordan Tyson or whatever the best, wide receivers available, because I do think there are 3 or 4 probably deserving of top 15 picks this year. So the argument people are going to make, those that Love is the best playmaker in the draft, and he's going to be, the number 2 or number 3 player on the big boards overall. So it just becomes, more of a positional value, argument with him or against him. So, hey, if Alvin Kamara is back, especially with, they have him under contract, I feel like he's had opportunities to leave. He wants to stay loyal. So we'll see how that goes. But no, I don't think it's imperative at all. And just the big thing for Shuck and any of these young guys, because I think Shuck earned the opportunity to be their clear-cut starter next year, and they're treating him that way and everything. But you just can't have these years like the first Justin Fields year in Chicago where you're like, oh, okay, I mean, he sucked, but who's he throwing to? Cam Ward last year. Wasted year. We can look at the cool highlights, but we just don't know if he's going to be the guy or not because he never had the chance to. Don't let that happen with Shuck. The single biggest goal for the Saints this year needs to be knowing if Shuck is going to be their guy in 2027 and beyond. And I don't think drafting Jeremiah Love in the top 10 is going to help you with that.
How dare you besmirch Mason Kinsey? He's great.
Bro, Devon Vele was making plays down the stretch. 27-year-old Devon Vele.
Yeah, he was. That game against the Dolphins won me a bunch of money on DraftKings. It was fantastic. A few more here. We have Woody Marks at number 31. Is there a chance Joe Mixon comes back? Remember him?
I know. I don't think so. It was Nick Cassieros, their GM, was talking about it, and he was like, I don't want to use the word freak when describing the injury, but it was a freak injury. So I don't know what's going on with that at all, man. I wouldn't be that shocked if Joe Mixon has played his last down of football. It's not like this dude exactly, has been completely scot-free in, the legal issue department in recent years. And honestly, as much as he wasn't bad or anything, it's also not someone who just had the sort of high end efficiency to lose a step and then still be fine. So I think Mixon is probably gone. Nick Chubb's a free agent. I'd be shocked if Houston, really does go into next season ready to anoint Woody Marks as their undisputed RB1. He was pretty bad and everything last year, but for right now, the way things stack up, I think he deserves to be right there next to Bill.
Last one, because we've said his name a few times, not really discussed him, is Bucky Irving. What happened? The injury happened, and then he was out for way longer than we thought he was going to be, and it never really clicked after that.
He went from being like the best running back in the league and all these yards after contact, missed tackles, forced stats, to literally one of the worst. So bad combination of when he was healthy. Tristan Wirfs was out and some of these other guys were banged up. And I don't think the offensive line was nearly gelling enough for him. And then once he came back, man, it was a shoulder injury, right? That he kind of initially sidelined him with. That was the main problem there. And when we see running backs, I don't have, hard evidence or anything, but just remembering it, rib injuries and shoulder injuries, dude. I feel like when they come back through those, they can linger, they can take a hard hit in a game, and then all of a sudden they're not running quite as violently because they're playing through a ton of pain. So we've seen these guys come back and, okay, they're healthy. And then, we're really concerned about it when they're questionable on the injury report. Are they going to be suiting up? But I think once they just start continuously playing through it for a couple of weeks, all of a sudden we kind of forget about it. So, Travis Etienne, Devon Achane, they saw their efficiency stink in 2024. I think in large part because they were playing through injuries. It is one of the things I want to also go through in the coming weeks is try to just find out what running backs did have these early season injuries that they played through and we kind of forgot about. And Bucky is one of those. So I'd like to think it's going to be better. Could help too that Rashad White's a free agent and seemingly looking elsewhere.
If you want to check out all of that work that Ian is talking about, I suggest you hit the description or just simply go to Fantasy Life and find all of his rankings, all of his work up there. You can always follow him on the X Machine as well. Why don't you just smash like and sub to the channel because we're not going anywhere. Coming up on Mayo Media Network, wide receivers, tight ends, ranked in order. Stay tuned.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!